Hello guys and welcome to another ProGuides video. My name is Christoph and today we'll be going over the new Pantheon. All his abilities have been modernized to flow better and allow for more skill expression. His identity has remained the same: win lane, dive your opponents, and force fights, otherwise lose the game. With his reworked abilities there are more options for him, he has a lot more room to outplay bad matchups, and in this video we're going to go over everything you need to play Pantheon at a high level. But if you guys are interested in taking your gameplay to the next level, then go to ProGuides.com where you can talk to a challenger coach right now, and they'll even play alongside you in a normal game to help you guys understand how to win. Go check it out using the description link below. Alright, let's go over some strengths of the new Pantheon. Well, it's very similar to the old Pantheon. He has strong roaming, he can accelerate games, he has a point-and-click stun, he can poke enemies under their turret, he's still a tower diving god, he has decent 1v1 and a strong skirmish, and he has a long-range execute. Let's go over some of his weaknesses. Well, he's a pretty underwhelming team fighter when he's behind. He's also very kiteable, his flanking is difficult to execute as well, he is very mediocre wave clear, and he's pretty weak in a 5v5. Let's go over how you're going to want to build him. Well, here's the bruiser setup. You're going to go with Conqueror, Triumph, Tenacity, Coup de Grace, Ravenous Hunter, Taste of Blood, or Sudden Impact. You're also going to want Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Unflinching, Triumph, and Tenacity. Start with a Corrupting Potion or Doran Shield based on matchup. Your abilities cost a decent amount of mana, so Corrupting Potion will help mitigate this. Your items will go Black Cleaver into Boots, into Spear of Shojin, into Death's Dance, Sterix, and then GA. Adaptive Force ×2 defensive stats based on matchup. Here it is on the screen. You can go for an Assassin build with Lethality or Armor Pen and Electrocute, but he will definitely feel better as a bruiser. He stacks up Conqueror quickly with his Empowered W, has great AD ratios, synergizes with Spear of Shojin pretty well, and longer fights allow him to continue to stack up Mortal Will. Alright, so speaking of Mortal Will, let's go right into his abilities. First off is Mortal Will, his passive. His passive reads, attacking or using abilities charges Mortal Will, maxing out at 5 stacks. At 5 stacks, Pantheon's next ability has a bonus effect. It's a pretty straightforward passive. You'll need to auto-attack minions to ramp up your passive so your abilities can be more effective in lane. During team fights, you'll have to consistently consider whether to use your abilities immediately, or if you should stack up Mortal Will before using one. Alright, now on to his Q, Comet Spear. His Q operates similar to Pyke's Q, tapping it stabs in front of Pantheon for flat damage and refunds part of the cooldown. Holding and releasing it makes him throw it, hitting all units in its path. Units beyond the first hit take 50% damage, and when throwing the spear, it'll also deal bonus execute damage if enemies are below 25% health. Against minions and monsters, the damage is slightly reduced as well. If empowered by Mortal Will, it will deal bonus damage and also slow. A cool thing about this ability is that you can flash while charging your spear. This will allow you to either flash into melee range, so you can instantly hit someone, or extend the range. Alright, now onto his W, Shield Vault. Pantheon leaps at a target enemy, stunning them for 1 second. If empowered by Mortal Will, he'll rapidly attack 3 times, dealing damage equal to 150% of his total AD. This will immediately give him 3 charges of Mortal Will. His E is Aegis Assault. Pantheon puts up a shield and begins a flurry of stabs in front of him. He's immune to damage from the direction he's facing. The caveat is that when moving backwards or sideways, he moves more slowly. When empowered with Mortal Will, the duration is extended. You can use this ability to block turret shots as well. It's on a pretty high cooldown, so you need to be smart about how you use it. This ability is best used defensively, but obviously there'll be times when you want to use it when you're on the chase. For the sake of maximizing damage, you should use this when chasing your enemies, not when they're fighting you. The exception is, of course, to block abilities that deal a lot of damage, but if you use this while chasing, you'll be able to move with your opponent and prevent them from creating distance between you. And finally, his ultimate is Grand Starfall. Pantheon will fall from the sky, landing slightly behind his target location. He then charges towards it, dealing damage to all opponents in the way. It also fully charges up Mortal Will. The area it covers is wide enough to cover most of the lane, but can definitely be dodged if your opponent has good awareness. When using this, you should know it's okay even if you don't manage to hit an enemy with it. Landing it from the side of your opponent can be difficult, but again, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's more important that you land it in a good position to follow up. If you can use it to engage down a lane or within chokes in the jungle, you'll have a much easier time landing it. Alright, now how to play Pantheon. In the early game, you need to look for opportunities to make plays and accelerate the game. That is the key to Pantheon. With a good lane matchup, this is something you can do by properly playing with your wave and zoning your opponents. If you guys are interested in understanding the depth of wave manipulation, we have a ton of tools on ProGuides.com to help you out. If your lane opponent mispositions or tries to fight you, there should almost always be ways for you to punish this and potentially pick up solo kills. Anytime they try to walk up to farm, you need to pressure with your Q. A tapped Q will deal a decent amount and refund half the cooldown. You can also empower it with Mortal Will, so after poking your opponent when they try to farm, work to stack your passive back up so you can repeat the process. When enemies look to trade heavily with you, use your E to block damage and trade back with them. One thing you need to be comfortable doing is diving, with or without your jungler. It's really simple. Anytime you have a power advantage over your opponent, trade with them. Jump on them with your stun, and then use your Q as well. If possible, W is usually the best ability to empower with Mortal Will. This is because Pantheon will automatically attack 3 times. He'll only need to attack 2 more times or 1 more time alongside an ability to fully stack Mortal Will again. As an added bonus, he'll stack up Conqueror very quickly. If your wave is going to take a long time before it crashes into the turret, you can use your E as well. When your opponent is playing far back, you can look to land max range Qs instead and farm the wave afterwards. Anytime the wave begins to push into you, do everything you can to trade damage onto your opponent. If you get them low, you can create a slow push for yourself and call your jungler to dive. Another option is to poke your enemy under the turret with your Q. When diving, make sure to save your E for your exit or empower it to tank 2 turret shots. This is important not only for your own lane, but also when you go to other lanes. Once you inevitably hit level 6, the elephant in the room needs to be addressed. Pantheon's iconic ult may have been reworked, but he's still the notorious man-dropping king. Here's what's changed though. He charges forward in a straight line, so your best approach when ganking other lanes is to aim your ultimate straight down it. By aiming behind your opponents, you'll also make it difficult for your enemies to escape once you've dropped onto them. The most effective way to roam other lanes is to create opportunities for good recall timers. Examples of this would be after a successful dive, after crashing in a huge wave, or having your jungler catch your wave for you. You should have no problem managing the wave in most matchups. One thing Pantheon does suffer from though in the early game is that his wave clear really isn't that good. If you find that you need extra wave clear, feel free to buy a Tiamat and build it into a Titanic Hydra later into the game. Alright, now let's talk about Pantheon in the mid and late game. Unless you've built a substantial lead in the early game, you're going to find it more difficult to 1v1 your opponents as the game progresses. Make sure to fight over objectives and look for any opportunities that you can to flank. Since you take turrets rather slowly, use power advantages to take lane priority and slow push minion waves. Once the wave crashes, look to roam elsewhere on the map with your ultimate. Off of a successful pick or teamfight, you can take objectives, reset to spend gold, and repeat the process. You'll also need to get deep wards whenever you can. The best opportunities for you to ult are at choke points in the jungle or when pushing for outer and inner turrets. Try to force your opponent into these areas and ult to start fights. In cases where you're much stronger than your opponent but while your team is weak, you'll want to split push and bully your opponent. With the long range on your Q, you can continue to push waves into turret and poke your enemies with your spear. If they're low, you can either dive them or hit the turret since they won't be able to contest the push. Make sure to prioritize Rift Herald as well. Picking Pantheon makes it easy to take and also very rewarding. Since you'll naturally want to roam elsewhere to make a play, you'll be rewarded even more for successful ganks since you can summon Rift Herald to take down turrets afterward. Alright, let's talk about trading with Pantheon. Pantheon's combos are very simple, so the only information needed is understanding when to use them. This will depend not only on the context of the situation, but also on how many stacks of Mortal Will you have. One thing to note is that he only has one true combo. All others aren't reliable and are used in certain situations. Here's Pantheon's true combo. Well, first you're going to need 5 stacks of Mortal Will, then you're going to use your W, then you're going to auto, and then you're going to E, chasing forward during the animation, and then finish off with a Q. This combo is extremely reliable. It deals the most damage possible when opponents are trying to run away. You can use this in lane when your opponents get greedy for farm. When roaming or team fighting, this is a pretty standard combo you'll use if you think that your enemies are going to try and burst you right after you stun someone. Alright, let's talk about his Q tap. You'll use a Q tap when you're playing versus melee champions in lane. This is extremely effective if you have Mortal Will stacked up. Right after stabbing an enemy with Q, you can attempt to move forward and auto attack them as well. In cases where they choose to extend the trade, stack up Mortal Will again, and you can either Q tap again button or charge it to try and execute them. Alright, let's talk about the Q hold and release. In lane, you'll use this combo when you've completely zoned your opponent off the wave or if you're trying to poke them under turret. Later on, you'll probably use this to follow up on your teammates' plays or to finish off opponents who are running away from you. Alright, now let's talk about W without 5 stacks. In lane, you can use your W with 2 or 3 stacks instead of 5. With 3 stacks, you can auto attack after and then use your Q tap. Do this if you either just want to poke your enemy and then end the trade, or if you want to try to extend it. When jumping in with 2 stacks, you'll auto-attack and Q immediately. Save your Mortal Will for your E when you think your opponent will try to trade back and block their damage while disengaging. By the end of the duration, your Q should be close to coming back up. Alright, now let's finish off with some tips while playing Pantheon. The first tip we'll give you is in teamfights, don't waste your E. The damage isn't that significant unless you're going to use it on a priority target. It's more of a defensive tool that allows you to reposition while still dishing out damage. Our next tip is remember that a Mortal Will empowered W will give you 4 Conqueror stacks. You can buff yourself up quickly and surprise your opponents with how strong you can instantly become. Our next tip is practice positioning for flanks. You'll need to prioritize gaining vision and also using pink wards. Due to the nature of your ult, your best bet is to either engage head first or from the exact opposite direction that your team is chasing so that you can pincer opponents. And our final tip for Pantheon is remember that your Q refunds some of its cooldown when you tap it. If you think your fights will go on long, make sure to tap it rather than hold it. That way you can use it multiple times. Once your enemies are low enough to execute, then you can look to finish them off with a charged Q. That's it for our video on Pantheon. Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys want to get better at League of Legends this season, then please use the description link below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck in your next few games, and we'll see you on the Rift.